My dad sneered. She can't even afford an economy ticket. My stepsister laughed as they walked onto the first-class jet bridge. I stayed silent until a man in uniform approached and said, "Your private jet is ready." Mom. Every single person around us stopped in their tracks. She can't even afford economy. The sound of rolling suitcases echoed through the airport terminal like steady drumbeats of judgment. Move faster. Mia. My father snapped. His voice sharp enough to make people turn their heads. You're holding us up. Again. I tightened my grip on my old, worn-out backpack, and kept walking, staring at the shining marble floor. My stepsister, Leia, strutted ahead, her designer heels tapping with confidence. She looked back and smirked. Maybe she's nervous, she said loudly enough for everyone to hear. It's probably her first time seeing a plane up close. My father laughed that fake, shallow laugh. I knew too well. She can't even afford economy. Leia. Don't expect her to know how airports work. Their laughter followed me like smoke. I didn't say anything. I'd learned that silence stings more than arguing. Instead, I looked out the huge windows at the runway, where planes gleamed under the bright morning sun. They were flying first class to New York, a family trip I'd been invited to. Though we all knew, I was only included out of obligation. Leia waved her first-class boarding pass in the air. Champagne before takeoff. Daddy, she said with a giggle. Then, glancing at me, enjoy, coach. Mia. Or, whatever you can afford. I stayed quiet. I'd made my choice 2 years ago to walk away from my father's company after he remarried a woman only 5 years older than me and handed her daughter everything I had worked for. Leia got the title, the office, and the praise. I got silence. Try not to embarrass us. Mia. My father said, his voice low. People talk. I met his cold eyes. People always talk. Dad. I said evenly. It's what they say later that matters. Before he could respond, the loudspeaker announced boarding for their flight. They gathered their expensive luggage and headed toward the gate. Leia turned and smirked. See you in economy if you can even get on the same plane. They disappeared down the jet bridge. Still laughing, I exhaled slowly, trying to ignore the sting in my chest. Travelers hurried past families, couples, business people, each one heading somewhere, each one living their own story. Then, a calm voice broke through the noise. Miss Monroe. I looked up. A tall man in a navy blue uniform stood before me, polished shoes, golden stripes on his sleeves, posture straight and respectful. Yes, I asked quietly. Your jet is ready. Ma'am, he said. We'll begin pre-flight whenever you're ready. For a moment, I thought I'd misheard him. But then I saw the faint smile on his face, the nearby passengers turning their heads, and my father and Leia standing frozen halfway down the jet bridge. My father's mouth fell open. Leia stopped mid-step, eyes wide. I adjusted my bag strap and smiled softly. Perfect timing, I said. I was getting tired of waiting. Gasps rippled through the nearby crowd. The officer nodded politely and gestured toward the private terminal, where a sleek black car waited beside the runway. Her? Jit Leia stammered. Yes. Mom, the officer said smoothly. Miss Monroe owns it. I met my father's stunned gaze and said calmly. You were right. Dad. I can't afford economy. It's too small for me now. Then I turned and walked away, leaving their shock behind. The car ride to the private hangar felt like freedom. The hum of the engines, the faint smell of jet fuel, all of it was power, earned the hard way. When I stepped into the cabin, polished wood and soft leather replaced the noise and judgment of the terminal. Welcome aboard, Miss Monroe, said Officer Grant, the pilot, his tone professional but warm. Thank you, I said, taking my seat by the window. The door closed with a soft hiss, shutting out the world that had belittled me for years. The engines started, and as we taxied down the runway, my phone buzzed. Dad. I let it ring twice, then answered. Yes. Mia. What kind of joke is this? He barked. No joke, I said calmly. I just stopped living by your definition of success. I asked you to be practical. He argued. Instead, you ran off chasing dreams. I smiled faintly. The dreams that built the company you're still using. Dad. The one I created before you handed it to Laya. Silence. Then his voice. Quieter. You could have stayed. You didn't have to leave. I looked out the window at the clouds forming. You're right. I said. I didn't have to. I chose to. The call ended. Grant placed a folder on the small table beside me. Your itinerary. Mom. Meeting with the Manhattan investors at 3 o'clock. Thank you. I said softly. He hesitated. Then added. If I may say, so not everyone gets to rise this far after being written off. I smiled. That's the thing about being underestimated. Grant. It's the quiet ones people should fear the most. The jet lifted. Smooth and steady. And the world below became small. 2 years ago. I'd walked out of my father's office with nothing but a laptop. A few contacts. And a stubborn heart. I built my company Monrovia Systems from scratch. While Leia flaunted luxury. I worked 18-hour days from coffee shops. Chasing clients who didn't believe in me. When the bank refused me a loan. I sold my car. When investors laughed. I smiled and kept coding. And now Monrovia Systems was worth hundreds of millions. The same people who once ignored my emails were begging for meetings. My phone buzzed again. A message from Dad. One word. How? I typed back. By becoming everything you said I couldn't be. When the jet touched down in Manhattan. The skyline glimmered like a challenge waiting for me. A black SUV waited at the terminal. My assistant, Sophie, greeted me with her usual calm smile. Everything's set. Ma'am. The Global Tech Summit starts in 2 hours. You're the keynote speaker and main sponsor. Perfect. I said. And the guest list. She handed me the tablet. Richard Monroe and his daughter confirmed attendance. Of course. My father never missed a chance for publicity. What he didn't know was that Monrovia Systems didn't just sponsor the event, we owned it. The car pulled up to the glass-fronted venue. Cameras flashed from every direction. I stepped out wearing a navy dress, simple. Elegant. Confident. Reporters called my name. Miss Monroe. Is it true? Your company bought the Global Tech Network, one shouted. I smiled slightly. Let's just say I like owning the rooms I was once kept out of. Inside. The hall glittered with chandeliers and murmurs of money. My father stood surrounded by investors. Leia at his side. Laughing too loudly. They hadn't seen me yet. The announcer's voice echoed, please welcome our keynote speaker, the CEO of Monrovia Systems. Miss Mia Monroe. The applause began. And then came the moment. My father turned. Clapping absently until he saw my face. His hands froze midair. Leia's glass slipped from her fingers. Mia, she whispered. I walked calmly to the stage. Took the microphone. And smiled. Good evening. Everyone. 2 years ago. I was told I'd never belong in a room like this. Tonight. My company sponsors it. Laughter. Applause. But I wasn't joking. I started Monrovia Systems with nothing but determination. I continued. No inheritance. No safety net. Just the memory of being told I wasn't enough. The applause grew stronger. My father couldn't look away. People ask what drives success. I said. Scanning the crowd. For me. It was simple humiliation. Teaches harder than privilege ever could. When I stepped off the stage. He was waiting. His smile was uncertain. His eyes full of things he didn't know how to say. Mia. He began quietly. I didn't realize how capable you were. No. I said softly. You didn't want to. Laya joined him. Arms crossed. So what? Mia. You think one lucky break makes you better than us. I turned toward her. Luck doesn't last 2 years. Laya. And success isn't inherited. It's built. Her jaw tightened. You think you've won? I smiled. No. I've just stopped losing by playing your game. My father sighed. You're still my daughter. Yes. I said. But I'm not the daughter you raised. I'm the one you created by underestimating. A looked down. His voice cracking. I'm sorry. Mia. And for the first time, I believed he might mean it. But some wounds don't need fixing. They just need closure. I forgive you. I said quietly. Not for you, for me. He nodded slowly. You've become someone I barely recognize. Good. I said. Stepping back. That means I did it right. The announcer called for closing remarks. Sophie gestured toward the stage. But I took a moment longer. Meeting my father's gaze one last time. You were right. I said. I can't afford economy. I was never meant to fly that low. That night. As the summit ended and I left the glowing hall behind. I felt something rare. Peace. The kind that comes not from revenge. But from reclaiming your power. Outside. The city lights glittered like a promise. My jet waited on the private runway. Engines, humming softly. Back to California. Ma'am, Grant asked as I climbed aboard. I nodded. Home. As the plane rose into the clouds. I thought of that morning at the airport, the laughter. The humiliation. Now. Miles above them. I finally understood. Some farewells aren't spoken. They're written in altitude. Story. 2. My mother giggled, said. You were the biggest mistake of my life. So. When the lawyer read the will. She finally understood why her name wasn't mentioned once. My name's Lena Park. I'm Venti Ort. And the first time my mother called me her biggest mistake was the day my grandmother decided to change her will. I was 12. Small enough that my feet didn't touch the floor when I sat at Grand's dining table. Old enough to know a room can hold its breath. It was a Sunday dinner at my grandmother's brick house with the peeling mint green shutters. The one that smelled like lemon oil and bay leaves because she kept a sprig tucked behind the stove. I had just passed around my report card, straight A's. Neat black ink on white paper. And Gran beamed the way a sunrise looks when it finally climbs over a hill. Then my mother laughed. You were the biggest mistake of my life. She said. Not even looking at me. Like she was tossing a gum wrapper toward a bin. And missing on purpose. Chair scraped. The clock over the doorway ticked too loudly. I remember a mustard stain on the checkered tablecloth. A small yellow moon just to the left of my plate. Gran's smile dropped like someone had cut a thread. My mother took a sip of iced tea. Clinked the glass on the coaster. And rolled her eyes. What, I'm being honest. Of course, she's a perfect student. She has no social life. If I hadn't had a kid at 20. I could have traveled. Had a career. Instead I got stuck. No one said a word. Not Aunt Mira. Who lived 2 streets over. Not Uncle Ray. Who always filled silence with jokes. Gran just looked at my mother for a long time with that gaze she used when something sharp was happening and she was deciding whether to touch it or leave it where it lay. Then she stood and put a hand on my shoulder. Come help me in the kitchen. Sweetheart. In the kitchen. I washed lettuce at the sink with my hands shaking so hard the leaves rattled. Gran came behind me and set her palm between my shoulder blades like she was pressing a page flat. Don't you listen to that. She said. Voice low. You are not a mistake. I know. I said. Because that is what you say when an adult gives you a lifeline in a crowded room. But the word mistake had already slid under my skin and found a warm place to sleep. I should have known that moment wouldn't be a one-off. For as long as I remember. My mother treated praise like there was a ration on it. Like if she gave me any. She'd have none left for herself. That dinner was the first time she said it out loud. But it wasn't the first time I'd felt it in the empty chair beside Gran at my school plays, or the unread permission slips crumpled at the bottom of my backpack. After that Sunday. The comments grew legs. At my 8th grade graduation. I wore a white dress that Gran had altered to fit. Even stitching a tiny blue ribbon along the inside seam for courage. I found my mother afterward in the parking lot, leaning against her car. Sunglasses on, though it was an overcast June afternoon. Well? She said. At least one of us got to finish school without a screaming baby. She laughed too loudly. Waiting for someone else to join. No one did. Gran squeezed my hand so hard, the ring on her finger left a crescent in my skin. At my high school awards night. The gym smelled like waxed floors and popcorn. My name was called too many times. Even I was embarrassed by how the clapping began to sound like a metronome. No one could stop. Gran stood up every time. The first to her feet. The last to sit. The chair next to her stayed empty, the one that should have had my mother in it. Later. When we got home. My mother opened the mail at the counter and said without looking up. Must be nice to have time for all those activities. I was changing diapers at your age. And then there were the small cuts that don't look like much at first. The time I came home from a summer job at $9.75 an hour. Stacking books at the library. And offered to buy groceries. Just to help. And she said. Keep your charity. Lena. I don't need my kid paying for my life. 2 days later, she asked if she could borrow $120 for a utility bill that was past due. When I hesitated, because I needed to pay for a graphing calculator by Friday, she stared at me like I was a stranger who just invaded her kitchen. Forget it. She snapped. I'll figure it out. I mowed 2 extra lawns that week and gave her the cash anyway. She slid it into her purse without a thank you. Or the Saturday I was supposed to be at a debate tournament. The one that would decide who made the regional team. And my mother texted at 6:11 a.m. Car won't start. Ride me to work. It wasn't really a request. I missed the warm-up round to drive her across town while she complained about the cost of a new battery. They want $189. Can you believe it? And then, as I dropped her off, she said, Don't tell Gran. She'll make it about how I'm irresponsible. I arrived just in time for round 2 with a coffee stain on my cuff and a pit in my stomach. I lost by a single point. People say every family has a golden child. In ours, it wasn't a sibling. It was my mother herself. Gran never said it. Not even once. But I watched the way the room bent around my mother's moods, like furniture, pulled toward a magnet. When she was easy, everyone exhaled. When she was brittle, we learned to step around the sharp parts. She knew how to be dazzling funny at cookouts. Charming with a new neighbor. The kind of person who could talk a parking ticket into a warning. And somehow, even when she insulted me in public, there would be a cousin. The real golden boy of the extended family with the football scholarship, or an aunt who'd say, She doesn't mean it. Lena. She's just under pressure. As if pressure were a person who could walk into a room and make your mother forget your name. Still, I kept looking for proof that the story could turn. That if I did enough, brought home the right trophies, made the right choices, the word mistake would get tired and go live somewhere else. There were flashes like the day I got into an advanced science camp and she clapped. Actually clapped. Before catching herself and saying, Just don't let it go to your head. Or the Saturday morning she showed up to one of my soccer games 20 minutes late and left 10 minutes later. But in those 10 minutes I scored, and when our eyes met, she lifted a hand. Almost a wave. I carried that almost for months. Gran. Meanwhile, became my map. After school, I'd ride my bike to her house. Blue helmet. Squeaky chain. Backpack bumping against my ribs, and she'd have apple slices and cheddar on a plate and a small pot of tea ready, because she said people answer better questions when they're not hungry. She never said anything bad about my mother. If she cried, it was alone over an old photo album in the living room, when she thought no one was watching. Her thumb resting on a picture of my mother at 17 with a grin I didn't recognize. She was fearless. I heard Gran whisper once. Not to me. Not to the room. But to the girl in the photograph who had no idea how her life would arc. On the wall by Gran's phone was a list of dates, dentist appointments, neighborhood meetings. The exact day she called the gas company each winter to lock in a rate. After that Sunday dinner, another date appeared in smaller writing. Almost a secret. July 18. I didn't know what it meant for years. Later I would learn it was the day she called her attorney. There were practical lessons with Gran. 2. She showed me how to write a budget on the back of an envelope. $42 for bus passes. $18 for school supplies. $30 set aside, even when you think you can't spare it. Money is a way you tell your future you care. She'd say, tapping the column with her pencil, when she slid an envelope into my suitcase a few years later. For emergencies. I'm so proud of you. I understood it wasn't just cash. It was continuity. I kept my own list of firsts. First time my mother left me waiting outside a movie theater because she'd driven past without stopping. I counted the minutes. 40. One before Gran's old sedan pulled up and she said nothing. Just handed me a warm scarf she'd kept on her lap. First time my mother borrowed my savings. $350 I'd tucked into a drawer for a school trip. Promising she'd pay me back on Friday. On Friday, she said next week. Next week became next month. Next month became silence. First time I heard her on the phone saying to someone else, "I'm just being honest. She'll be fine." That was the part that stuck to my ribs, how confident she was, that I would be okay no matter what she said. Even then, hope was a habit I couldn't break. I told myself that if I got into a college, far away, and built something sturdy, my mother would see me from a distance. The way people suddenly notice a new skyline. Maybe the anger was a phase. Maybe the golden child glow she carried would finally dim. And she'd look around and realize the person steadying the furniture was me. I should have known hope can be a trick door. Because on quiet nights after homework, when the house felt like it had exhaled and gone to sleep, I would catch my mother at the kitchen table with brochures, spread out condos with glossy pools, palm trees that looked like filters had been applied in real life. She'd circle numbers with a pen. $5. 000 down. 30 days to close. She'd stare over the top of the page like she could see through the wall into a life she thought she deserved. Whenever she noticed me, she'd flip the brochure shut as if I were a draft that made her cold. And there were calls. Calls that came later almost every evening to Gran. To lenders. To cousins with vague promises of, "I'll make it up to you." Phrases floated through the house cosign. "Just until I catch up. You know how hard it's been." If I stood in the hallway and held my breath, I could hear the way Gran's voice went soft but firm. The way a person sounds when they're trying to hold a line across a river. On that first Sunday. Before any of it hardened into pattern. Before numbers and dates etched themselves into our lives. I remember the sound of Gran's knife on the cutting board. The rhythm of it. I remember my mother's laugh and how it made the ceiling feel lower. I remember the mustard moon on the tablecloth. A ridiculous detail. Maybe. But that's how memory works. It chooses a color and won't let go. Years later, when the lawyer slid a sealed letter across a polished desk, and my mother's face changed in a way I'd never seen, I thought of that stain. I thought of July 18 written small on Gran's calendar. I thought of 12-year-old me, trying not to cry into a sink full of lettuce while a woman who had survived so many storms placed her hand between my shoulders and said I was not a mistake. I didn't know yet what had been set in motion that day. I didn't know the will had already been updated. Or that a recording existed with dates and signatures and the slow, careful voice of a woman who understood the difference between love and performance. I only knew the room had learned to hold its breath around my mother, and that breath, like all withheld things, I would someday rush back in. I used to think the house itself understood who kept it alive. The front steps creaked differently when Gran climbed them soft, apologetic while they groaned under my mother, as if bracing for whatever mood she was carrying. After that Sunday, the house became my weather report. If Gran's curtains were open, it meant tea and calm. If they were drawn in the middle of the day, it meant my mother had blown through and left a low-pressure system behind. Freshman year of high school, I taped my schedule to the fridge so my mother would know when to show up. She never looked at it. She knew without asking when my paycheck hit. Though, on the first Friday of my job at the library, I came home with a folded envelope, $117. 00. For 2 weeks of reshelving and wrestling with the label maker, and put it in a jar marked college. My mother tapped the glass with her nail. "We need gas money," she said. "Just $20. I'll put it back." She didn't. The next week, it was $40, just this once. And a month later, $85, because the insurance bill came early. When I finally asked for $25 to pay my science Olympiad fee, she sighed like I'd asked her to lift the car with her hands. "Join fewer things," she said. "You're addicted to applause." I should have known the math would never add up. For as long as I remember, there was always a new reason. Money evaporated in our house. A cousin's fundraiser. A flash sale on shoes. A membership she was definitely going to use. Gran taught me to track numbers with a pencil. My mother taught me how fast ink can blur when someone keeps setting a wet glass on the page. There were bigger asks too. The kind with deadlines and consequences. At 15, she put a form on the table and said, "You have the better credit. Sign here." I stared at the boxes, cosigner, applicant, lines for initials. "You can't," I said. "I'm not even old enough." She rolled her eyes. "It's just a phone plan. Lena, don't be dramatic." Gran appeared in the doorway like she had sensed smoke. I'll put it in my name, she said evenly. Later. On the porch. She pressed $60 into my palm. For your fee. Don't tell her, she added. Not because she liked secrets, but because peace in our family sometimes required quiet math. Meanwhile, the ache of that empty chair at my events deepened into a fact. Like gravity. At the fall play, Gran sat in seat B12 and left B11 for my mother. The usher stopped asking if anyone was coming. At the winter concert, Gran's scarf trailed over the armrest into the empty space, like a flag, marking a loss. She never complained. But on the ride home, she'd turn the radio low and say, "That second piece you bent the note just right." She noticed the small things, which made the big absences louder. Sophomore spring. The school posted a list of scholarship deadlines on a bulletin board. I wrote every date in my planner and in a column on Gran's wall calendar because she treated calendars like living things that needed attention. The first application required $35 for transcripts. When I told my mother, she said, "Ask your grandmother. She loves paying for your hobbies." I swallowed the correction that college wasn't a hobby, and walked 2 streets over. Gran didn't even let me finish before she opened her wallet. "Bring me the receipt," she said. Practical as ever. She wanted me to have proof for myself that these small fees added up to real momentum. There were moments when my mother almost reached out and then snatched her hand back like the air burned. On my 16th birthday, she hung a string of lights in the kitchen and baked a cake from a box. We cut slices while the bulbs hummed. "Make a wish," she said. I wished she'd stay for the stupid movie Gran rented. She stood, checked her phone, and said she had to run. "Don't wait up." The lights flickered as the door shut. Gran and I watched the movie anyway. The sound low. Halfway through, I realized I was holding my breath the way I did at awards nights. Waiting for footsteps that never came. By junior year, the golden child narrative had an audience beyond our family. My mother had a talent for being dazzling with strangers. At a neighborhood cookout, she balanced a paper plate and told stories about raising a genius with a laugh that made people lean in. She knew all the kids' names. All the dog breeds. All the shortcuts to charm. But the minute we were alone, the glitter fell. On the drive home, she said, "You should have thanked me when Mrs. Lopez complimented you. I don't know why you freeze up." I stared through the windshield at the flashing turn signal. I said thank you. I murmured. "Not loud enough." She replied, as if gratitude were a performance scored by volume. I kept working. After the library closed at 8. I cleaned the Gleam and Shine custard shop until 1030 p.m. for $10. 25 an hour. Then biked home under street lamps that buzzed like horseflies. On Saturdays, I tutored a 7th grader named Evan in algebra for $18 cash that his mother folded into a thank you card each week. I saved the cards in a shoebox because I needed proof. Sometimes, that kindness existed outside our front door. Gran was my constant. She came to everything, plays, meets, a poetry slam where I read a piece about a kitchen table that listened better than most people, and she wiped her eyes like I'd written her a private letter. When I fretted over college essays, she made tea and asked questions that steered me back to myself. "What did you learn the day you lost the debate by 1 point?" she asked. "That help isn't the same as love," I said. She tapped her pencil twice. "Write that." Signa file. Envelopes began to arrive. Thick and thin. I lined them up on Gran's mantle, a small skyline of futures. When the acceptance from Northlake University came, full tuition if I kept a 3.5. I took the bus to Gran's, burst into the kitchen, and held the letter, the way people hold newborns. She read it twice, then hugged me so hard, we both laughed. "You built a bridge," she said. "Now walk across." My mother's reaction landed like a stone in a pond, loud at the surface, then sinking out of sight. "Finally," she said, tossing the letter onto the table. "Some freedom." She didn't ask which state Northlake was in. She didn't ask the program, the dorm, the orientation date. She did ask if I could give her $300 to hold me over because her paycheck had been messed up again. I handed her $150, my total after rent, to Gran for the room I technically didn't pay for, and she clicked her tongue. "You're tight," she muttered, as if thrift were an insult. There were 3 big incidents that winter that rearranged the furniture of my hope. First, in December, 2 days before finals, My mother called at 9:47 p.m. They're going to shut off the power if I don't pay $212 by tomorrow. Do you want me to freeze? I had $230 in my account. $120 was earmarked for a jacket I'd been saving for. The rest was bus fare and gifts I'd already bought. I said I could send $150 tonight and the rest on Friday. She exhaled, like I'd offered her pennies. Fine. I sent it. On Friday. She texted. Never mind. Figured it out. She didn't return the difference. 2nd in January. She asked me to drive her to a car lot, just to look at. We walked the rows while a salesman named Dennis hovered. My mother stood by his silver hatchback. Eyes shining. It's $8. 900. She whispered. Like it was a secret between us. Monthly is only $249. In the office. Papers appeared. She'll cosign. My mother said before I could speak. I felt Gran's lessons thrum in my bones. I can't. I said. I'm leaving in August. I can't risk my credit. My mother's smile cracked. So when do I get a break? Lena. When do I get something for doing this alone? Dennis looked at the ceiling. I stared at the cup of blue pens and said nothing. We drove home in silence. She didn't talk to me for 3 days. 3rd in March. My debate coach told me I'd qualified for nationals. If I could cover $480 for travel. I brought the form home. Buoyant. Rehearsing the speech I'd give to convince my mother. I found her at the kitchen table with a brochure open to a palm-lined street. Florida condos are cheaper than people think. She said, without looking up. If I put $5,000 down. I can move by fall. I waited for a pause that didn't come. Nationals is $480. I said. Coach says I could, she flicked her hand. I can't right now. I stood there. Paper sweating in my palm. Gran can help. She added. She likes that stuff. The way she said likes, made my future sound like a hobby again. I brought the form to Gran's that evening. She read it. Then asked me to get the tin from above the fridge. Inside were labeled envelopes, tax. Roof. Gifts. A tiny one that said rainy days. She counted $100 soft as prayers and tucked them into my form. Write me receipts. She said. Not because I don't trust you. Because someday, you'll want to see this trail. On the bus home, I held the packet like a brick of possibility. I should have known that success purchases envy as often as it buys pride. Graduation came with a heat wave. The gym was an oven, the gowns clung. Names spilled from the principal like a rosary. When mine was called for honors, the applause rose in waves. Friends. Teachers. Gran loudest of all. I scanned for my mother and caught sight of her in the doorway. Sunglasses on. A new dress with the tag still outlined as if the sticker had only just been peeled off. She lifted her phone. Took a photo without stepping inside. And left. Maybe she had to work. I told myself. Like I had 100 times. Gran's hand found mine and squeezed. You did it. She whispered. You built the bridge. The summer was logistics boxes. Lists. A part-time job at $13.00 an hour scanning forms at the county office. My mother floated in and out. Light as a rumor. When she was home. She was on the phone. If I get the condo now, I can Airbnb the second room. I heard her say to someone. It's practically passive income. To Gran. She pitched it differently. After everything I've been through. Don't you think I deserve a fresh start? The word deserve clanged against the cupboards. One afternoon in July. My mother asked me to meet her at a cafe. I arrived to find a glossy folder on the table, and her smile turned up to 11. Look. She said. Sliding it over. Floor plans. Artist renderings. A pool so blue, it looked radioactive. If you loan me, comma 2. 0, 0, 0, just a temporary bridge and cosign. I can lock a unit before prices jump. She had rehearsed the words, temporary bridge, because she knew the metaphor worked on me. I'm sorry. I said. Careful to keep my voice steady. I can't. She sat back as if I'd slapped her. Gran will. She said. She understands. I biked straight to Gran's and found her at the sink with her sleeves rolled. When I told her, she dried her hands and led me to the table. I told her I would think about it, she said, placing a legal pad between us. On it, she had columns. Fixed income. Savings. Emergency. Numbers tidy and merciless. If I do it, the math breaks by winter, she said softly. And once it breaks, it's hard to make it hold again. She reached into a drawer and pulled out an envelope, sealing it, before handing it to me. For when you go, she said. I knew without opening it what was inside, a cushion for hard days. A promise she could put in my pocket. The rest of the summer I packed in stages. Gran insisted we label everything. Kitchen mugs. Books keep out. Desktop drawer. My mother didn't help. But she did ask me twice if I'd be available in September to help her move if the condo comes through. I said I didn't know my schedule yet. She pouted like I'd canceled a vacation. 2 days before my flight, Gran surprised me with a small party lemon bars. Paper triangles cut into a banner that said Go, Lena. Which made me laugh because the comma changed the whole sentence. My mother showed up an hour late, kissed the air beside my cheek, and stood in the kitchen complaining about airline baggage fees. They want $40 for a second bag, she said. As if she were the one traveling. Gran pressed an extra $50 into my hand when no one was looking. For snacks, she said. Airports think they're hotels. The morning I left, my mother dropped me at the curb and idled. Eyes on the line of cars. She didn't get out. Text when you land, she said. I will. I waited for something, advice. Blessing. Anything. She checked her mirror. Don't forget about the condo, she said. If I can close by October, the rates won't kill me. I stood there with my backpack cutting into my shoulders and watched her car disappear. Gran arrived 5 minutes later. Parked. Turned off the engine. And walked me inside. She stayed until the gate. You're not a mistake, she said again. Just in case the sky forgot. College felt like a clean window after years of fingerprints. The campus had maples that blazed in October and professors who wrote feedback that read like conversations. I called Gran every Sunday at 6 p.m. We talked about grocery prices and classes and whether my roommate's habit of alphabetizing our spices was a kindness or a cry for help. I texted my mother twice a month because I thought that was what good daughters did. She called when she needed something. My car needs a new alternator, $430. Can you spot me? Rent's short by $200 just this month. Could you put plane tickets on your card? I'll reimburse you. That last one stung because she never used the ticket. She canceled 2 days before the engagement party I threw in Seattle years later and said, too far. Gran flew with a cane and grin, insisting the aisle seat was just like the theater, if you squint. Back home, the condo plan hardened into a mission. My mother rang Gran more often. I didn't grasp how relentless it had gotten until one Sunday when Gran mentioned it casually. Like a weather report. She calls most mornings, Gran said. Says this is her chance. I asked what she told her. Get on, Syed. Long and even. That I would think about it. She tapped the calendar where she had written my midterms and dental appointment and the day she was going to bake pumpkin bread. In small letters. At the bottom of the month, she wrote, review finances. I didn't know then that she had another appointment too. At an office with frosted glass and quiet pens. Where people write down the wishes they don't trust time to hold. I should have known the calls meant something was about to give. The world has a way of going quiet right before it does something loud. Gran said the trick to keeping a house honest was opening the windows once a day. Even in winter. To let the air move. Stagnant air makes people mean, she'd say. Lifting the sash an inch while the kettle hissed. I remembered that line more often once I left for college, and the calls from home turned into weather reports. I couldn't change high pressure from my mother in the morning. A long front of silence in the afternoon. Scattered requests by night. By sophomore year, my life was split screen. On campus, I learned how to read a syllabus like a map. How to make soup that didn't taste like regret. How to sit in a library until midnight with a yellow lamp and feel gentler toward myself. Back home, my mother was still running a campaign with a single plank. The condo would fix everything. I started recognizing the signs of a pitch before the words arrived, the bright hello after weeks of nothing. The rush of reasons. The small dig that made no sense but somehow made me feel guilty. I'm only asking because you're so organized, she'd say. Or, You're the only one who doesn't make me feel stupid about money. There were months when the requests layered so fast, I began keeping a notes app titled Outflows Feb 3 Alternator. $430. Just until Tuesday. Mar 14 phone bill reactivation. $96. They messed up. APR, 2 groceries. $80. I'll pay you back Friday. Friday came and went. I deleted the word loan from my vocabulary because it made everything too hopeful. Gran never scolded me for sending money. She did. However, start asking me to put numbers on paper even when I didn't want to see them. If you can name the sum, she said one Sunday. You can name the cost. We sat on the phone and made a list. Tuition covered. Books. $110 this term. Buspas, 48 Food, $36 a week. If I planned and didn't buy coffee I couldn't afford. She asked me to add a new line. What you give away. The first time I filled it in, my throat tightened. Seeing the total made me understand why the ends of the month felt like a thin rope. The last spring before I graduated. Gran's voice changed. Not the words, those were still practical. Still threaded with warmth, but the edges. She cleared her throat more. She paused mid-sentence, as if trying to hear a sound behind another sound. Allergies. She said when I asked. 2 weeks later, a summer cold that wants to be famous. She refused to be dramatic about her own body. Still. She kept every appointment, dental cleanings, on the second Wednesday. Her book club on the third Friday. A checkup circled in red. When I asked if she wanted me to come home, she laughed. For a sniffle. Absolutely not. Save your money. Graduate. My mother didn't mention Gran's cough. She mentioned a pre-approval letter with numbers so hopeful, they read like fiction. They said, my credit's not that bad. She announced one morning. As if I had doubted her personally. If I can put $5,000 down, I'm in. Where would the down payment come from? She had a plan. Of course. It always began with, if everyone who loves me helps a little. That June, Gran sent me a photo of her backyard peonies exploding like fireworks. Captioned, look what refuses to quit. I printed it and taped it over my desk. Finals week felt less lonely when the flowers stared back. I called the day after my last exam. Babbling about a professor who'd written, you think with your whole mind. Not just the part that wants a grade. Gran chuckled. Keep that sentence. You'll need it when someone tries to measure you with the wrong ruler. The job hunt after graduation was brutal and endless, and then suddenly over. A mid-sized firm in Seattle, clean lobby. Glass conference rooms. Decent pay, offered me a position. I said yes on the spot. Hung up. And dialed Gran. She answered on the first ring like she'd been standing by the phone. Tell me everything. She said. I did. Pacing the length of my rented room. Describing the view of the water from the office break room as if I'd already stood there. I called my mother next. Seattle, she said. Drawing out the word until it sounded like a threat. That's far. I waited for the pivot, and it arrived right on time. Do you know what the market's doing right now? If I don't get the condo by October, the rates will murder me. She laughed. A bright sound that didn't reach me. But hey. Congrats. I moved in August. A second-hand couch and 3 boxes of books. Gran's quilt folded over the back like a promise. My mother didn't help me pack. She didn't come to the airport. Candid. She slipped an envelope into my tote at the curb. The paper soft with being handled. Inside was $2. 000 and a note. For emergencies. I'm so proud of you. Gee. I cried in the security line. Wiping my face with my sleeve and pretending it was the air conditioning. Seattle was a new alphabet. Streets with names I mispronounced. A normal that included rain that showed up without asking, and left without apologizing. I built a life small piece by small piece. A friend from work who shared her soup recipes. A neighborhood bookstore where the owner learned my name and my preference for creaky editions. A Sunday market where a man sold flowers that looked like they'd been painted. I called Gran every week. We talked about everything and also nothing. She asked what the water smelled like. Tin and salt. I said. And she hummed as if I'd read her a poem. My mother's calls came in clumps. A week of silence. Then 4 in a day. She wanted things that didn't travel well, my signature. My credit. My time. I need you to co-sign the credit card so I can get the initial 0%. She said one Thursday. As if interest rates were tied, and I were the moon. I can't. I said softly. Bracing for the crash. It came. As always. So convenient that you get to say no now. Must be nice. The call ended with the kind of quiet that isn't peaceful. Then came the condo push at full volume. My mother visited a development with a name that sounded like a perfume, azure palms, and texted photos of staged rooms with bowls of fake lemons. This is it. She wrote. 2 beds. Near the water. If Gran loans me $3. Ding ding ding. I can secure it. I called Gran immediately. She didn't pick up. 2 hours later, she called back. Breathy from the stairs. She's very persistent this week. She said. The understatement. So perfect we both laughed. Then she coughed. A short, dry sound that made me sit up. I'm fine. She said. I am not porcelain. I wish I could say I flew home then. I didn't. My vacation days were counted out like coins, and my rent had a way of arriving every first whether my heart could handle it or not. I sent tea and a humidifier. I texted twice as often. I told myself, the cough was a season, and seasons change. In late October. Gran didn't answer our Sunday call at Schweck P.M. For 12 years. We'd kept that appointment like church. I left a message. My voice too bright. At 6:37. She called back. Apologetics. A nap got the better of me. She said. I'm all right. Don't scold me. The way she said all right sat wrong in my ear. Like a picture frame tilted just a bit. November brought rain that felt personal and a new habit of waking at 3 a.m. and staring at the ceiling until the city yawned. When I couldn't sleep. I counted reasons to be calm, Gran's stubbornness. Her calendar with every square filled. The sound of her laugh when I told her my boss said deliverables 4 times in one sentence. Then. One Thursday. My mother called at 7:12 a.m. Her time. Breathless. You need to convince Gran. She said. Without hello. She's being ridiculous about the condo. Prices will never be this low again. It was such a familiar script that for a second I relaxed. Familiarmente normal. I'm not going to convince her. I said. It's her money. She made a noise like a scoff swallowed wrong. You always take her side. 2 days later. Gran and I had our last long conversation. We didn't know it was the last. We talked about pumpkin bread. We talked about my coworker who microwaved fish. We talked about my mother. But only gently, how some people live inside a story so tight they can't turn their heads. I told her I would think about it. Gran said again. Of the condo. The sentence now. A refrain. Thinking is not the same as agreeing. That week. I mailed Gran a scarf from the market. Hand-dyed. The color of stormy water. It arrived on a Tuesday. She sent a photo of herself wearing it. Hindukt. Eyes bright. Captioned. Warmth achieved. On Wednesday night. I texted. Sleep well. Gee. No answer. I fell asleep anyway. Convinced that morning would bring the usual emoji heart or a weather report. Gran died in her sleep early Thursday. At 89. The house very still. The windows closed because the night had been unusually cold. It was a neighbor who called my mother when Gran didn't pick up her paper. It was my mother who called me. Her voice strange. Higher than usual. She's gone. She said. And then. As if the next sentence had been waiting on her tongue. We need to talk about the house. Everything after that moved like a film sped up without sound. And yet, certain details burned into perfect focus. The way the flight attendant touched my wrist when we hit turbulence. The smell of Gran's hallway laundry soap. Lemon oil. Something faintly floral. I could never identify. The way the front steps held their breath when I climbed them. The funeral was everything Gran deserved and more than any of us could carry. The chapel filled before the doors were supposed to open. People I'd never seen took my hand and told me what she'd done for them, rides to clinics. Casseroles at midnight. Envelopes with $20 for the bus that had arrived just when life was heaviest. The pastor spoke about steady kindness. A neighbor read a poem. I stood at the pulpit with my printed eulogy and tried not to cry on the part where I thanked a kitchen table for teaching me how to listen. My mother sat in the front row. A black dress that fit too well. A tissue balled in her fist. She played the part of grieving daughter like a role she'd understudied for years. And maybe it wasn't all performance. Grief is rarely tidy. But even from the pulpit, I could see the moments where she scanned the room. Calculating who had come. Who had flowers. Who might be useful later. When the service ended, she hugged the people Gran loved and told them what a saint her mother had been. On the sidewalk afterward, before the hearse door shut, she gripped my elbow. We should sell the house, she said, eyes gleaming the way they did when a plan took root. It's worth at least $800. 0 inches. This market. We split the proceeds. And I can finally breathe. We haven't even read the will, I said, the words tasting like dust. She waved her hand. Formality. I'm her daughter. You'll get something, too. Obviously. But the bulk goes to me. She said bulk like she was talking about rice in a warehouse. I didn't argue in the parking lot of the church where Gran had sung alto and stuffed envelopes every fall. I walked to my car and sat with my forehead on the steering wheel until the glass cooled. In the evening, the family gathered at Gran's house to eat 2 sweet cake and tell stories that kept almost being funny. My mother floated from group to group like a host. Every few minutes, her gaze slid to the framed photo of the house in spring. Peonies in front. The porch like a grin. The lawyer's office called the next day. Next Wednesday, they said. My mother bought a new outfit. She told anyone who would listen that at last, after everything she'd endured, her ship had come in. She toured condos online and spoke in numbers square footage. HOA fees. Airy phrases about community amenities. She said she had already started packing. She didn't ask if I wanted anything from Gran's. I made my own list, the quilt. The peony photo. The lemon squeezer with the chipped handle. The mustard-stained tablecloth. No one else remembered. At night, I slept in Gran's spare room with the window cracked even though the air had a bite. I dreamed of her handwriting on envelopes and woke to my mother's voice in the kitchen, telling someone, it's basically done. The will is a formality. In the morning, I opened every window. Just an inch. Enough to let the air move. Enough to remind the house it could still tell the truth. By Tuesday night, the house started to sound like it was practicing, holding its breath. The refrigerator hummed. The clock ticked. The floorboards adjusted to the cool. But the air itself felt tight. Like the living room had been wrapped in plastic. I set Gran's peony photo on the mantel and the lemon squeezer beside it. Small anchors. To stop the room from drifting into whatever story my mother was rehearsing. She had turned the dining table into a planning station. Printouts of condos fanned like playing cards, azure palms. The tides. Sunset quarters and a legal pad where she'd drawn little boxes to check off call movers. List furniture. HOA bylaws. Every few minutes, she'd grab a pen and fill another box as if the future obeyed ink. Do you think a storage unit is overkill? She asked no one. Then checked price storage anyway. She held up a picture of a balcony with a view of water so blue it looked like a promise. Morning coffee here, I mean. Come on. My aunts and uncles orbited carefully. Uncle Ray washed dishes that weren't dirty. Aunt Mira offered to make tea and then forgot her offer halfway to the kettle. My cousin Noah. Back in town, between training camps. Paced in the yard. Pretending to take calls. People kept asking me how I was doing, and then answering for me. You're a rock. They'd say. Gran raised you right. I nodded and found tasks: fold napkins. Carry chairs. Label a box. Linens keep because movement made the ache less loud. Late. When the house dimmed to lamplight, I paced the hallway and ended at Gran's bedroom door, the way water ends at a shore. The bed was made hotel tight. On the dresser, her hairbrush lay with 2 silver strands, glinting, as if they'd chosen to stay. A small stack of envelopes sat neatly in a tray. Her tidy handwriting on the front trash pickup. Insurance. Library. There was a space in the tray as if something had been there and wasn't now. I reached for the gap and drew my hand back. Some absences are meant to be respected. My mother knocked lightly on the doorframe and then entered without waiting. Can't sleep either? She asked. Voice soft. Almost kind. For a second, I saw the girl in the old photos, the fearless one Gran used to talk to with her thumb on the glossy paper. My mother touched the bedspread, smoothing a wrinkle that wasn't there. Your grandmother always liked things. Decided. She smiled at her reflection in the mirror. Not at me. Tomorrow will help. Closure. Tomorrow is the reading. I said. I wanted the word will to land with weight. But it floated. She nodded. Eyes back on the mirror. The lawyer, what's his name again? Mr. Halvorsen. Right. She tucked a strand of hair behind her ear. He's solid. I spoke with him today. Something in my chest snapped to attention. You did. Just to confirm the time. Her smile sharpened. And to make sure the house is appraised properly. Did you know, the place across the street went for $815? 000 last month. No garage. This one, at least has charm. That was a full renovation. I said. And immediately hated giving her facts to use as kindling. She shrugged. Charm adds $20K easy. She glanced around the room again. Assessing. Tallying. I'm thinking we list fast. If we close by November, I can be in Florida before Christmas. New Year's on a balcony. Can you imagine? Her voice took on that bright lift it gets when a plan feels inevitable. I stared at the lemon squeezer on the mantel visible down the hall. A chipped handle that fit Gran's hand for 30 years. I can imagine Gran baking on New Year's. I said. That she actually did. She didn't take the bait. You'll get something. She added quickly. As if generosity had occurred to her, and she wanted me to witness it. Furniture. Money. We'll make it fair. I nodded because nodding cost less than arguing and because I could already hear my grandmother's voice, save your breath for the climb that matters. Sleep didn't come. I lay on the couch under Gran's quilt. The peonies on the mantel glowing faintly in the dark. At 3:11 a.m. I gave up and made tea the way Gran did kettle. Patient. Wait. Warm the mug first. I opened a window an inch to let the night breathe. Somewhere a sprinkler ticked. Somewhere, a truck downshifted. When the kettle sang, I almost looked up expecting to see Gran wiping her hands on a towel and asking about my day, as if she'd just stepped into the room from the long haul of the years. Morning arrived thin and pale. By 9:00. The house was a shuttle station. Car doors. Zippers. Keys landing in bowls. My mother appeared in a new black suit. The fabric still stiff with store air. Her hair was freshly blown out. Her nails a pale pink that read as tasteful on camera. She looked prepared. We should go early, she said. As if punctuality were immoral. Parking downtown is a nightmare. At the lawyer's office, the carpet was the color of oatmeal, and the plants were too healthy to be real. The receptionist wore a small pin that looked like a lighthouse. She offered water in cups with a gold rim. My mother took two and set them side by side like a still life. Hydrate, she said to me. Chirpy. Big day. Family trickled in. Aunt Mira sat close to me and squeezed my knee under the table. The old code for I'm here. Even if I don't know what to say. Uncle Ray removed his hat and rotated it. A nervous orbit. Noah leaned against the wall. His bulk, making the framed diplomas look fragile. A cousin I didn't recognize whispered to another cousin about market rates and probate like they were auditioning for a show about finance. My mother worked the room. She wanted me to have something nice. She told Aunt Mira, touching the lapel of her suit. You know how she was. She turned to the receptionist. Isn't this view amazing, then? To the room at large. I already started looking at places, just getting ideas. You have to be proactive. Mr. Halvorsen finally appeared, gray suit. Kinder eyes than his profession requires. He shook hands. Said names back to people like he was studying for a test. I'm sorry for your loss. He told each of us. And I believed he meant it. He ushered us into a conference room with too many chairs and a window that framed a sliver of sky. On the table, a manila envelope waited. It was ordinary in the way doorways are without ceremony. It held the place where things change. My mother sat at the head of the table without asking if anyone minded. She set her phone face down in front of her. The camera toward the ceiling. And smoothed her skirt. Shall we? She said. As if she were the host. Before we begin, Halvorsen said gently, I want to acknowledge that this can be hard. Even when wishes are clear. The reading can bring up feelings. He looked around, giving people a chance to show their cards. The room offered silence. He took a breath and opened the envelope. The rustle of paper made my skin prickle. I glanced at my mother. She tilted her head. The way a person does when listening to a song they already love. Waiting for their favorite line. Last will and testament of Evelyn Grant. He began. Using Grant's full name. Which always made her sound like someone who should have a street named after her. Executed on July 25. Witnessed by. The date thudded against my ribs. July. The tiny notation I'd seen on her calendar years ago. July 18, call attorney. The breath I'd been holding since midnight eased out in a careful stream. Halvorson read the formalities, first revoking prior wills. Appointing an executor. The legal scaffolding that holds a wish steady. My mother's fingers tapped the table. Counting beats. Only she heard. When he said her name for the first time, to my daughter. Caroline Park. Her chin lifted by a fraction. A queen acknowledging the herald. He paused. The room tilted toward him. Noah crossed his arms. Aunt Mira bit her lip. I traced the chip in the conference table veneer and imagined Grant's pencil tapping the edge of her legal pad at home. Counting columns. To my daughter. Halvorson repeated. And then he shuffled to the next page. As if careful with the weight of the sentence. He didn't look at my mother. He looked at the words. Outside the window. A gull swooped past. White wing. Sudden flash. Gone. The small things memory keeps. My mother's phone buzzed. She placed a palm over it. Calming it like an anxious pet. And flashed an apologetic smile around the table, without a shred of apology in it. Silenced. She whispered. And did not silence it. Before I proceed. Halvorsen said. Lifting his gaze at last. Mrs. Grant left a letter to be read alongside the will for context. With your permission. He looked at me when he said context. And then at the family. He did not look at my mother. My mother leaned forward. Her voice bright and impatient. Fine. Read the letter. We're all adults. He reached into a separate folder and withdrew a white envelope with Grant's handwriting on the front. The loops precise. The E, in Evelyn, like a flourish at the start of a dance. He broke the seal carefully. As if the paper could bruise. He unfolded the letter and smoothed it with the back of his hand. I felt the air in the room change, the kind of hush a theater has when the lights dim, and you can hear the audience remember to be quiet. Dear ones. He read. And the words sounded so much like Grant that my eyes stung. If you're hearing this, I've done my last bit of paperwork. A tiny smile passed over his mouth. Not his smile, hers. Borrowed for a second. I want you to understand why I'm making the choices you're about to hear. My mother shifted. We do understand. She said. Not quite under her breath. We were close. Aunt Mira's hand found mine again. Pressing in a rhythm that said. Breathe. Uncle Ray cleared his throat. Noah stared at the window, like he could muscle the sky into steadiness. Halvorsen continued. The letter didn't leap to declarations. It did what Gran always did, set the table first. She talked about the house, a good house. Not fancy. Honest, and about kindness as a budget line you must fund on purpose. She talked about the day I was 12. She didn't name the mustard stain. But I could feel it there, and about how some sentences come with interest. Accruing meaning over years. People show you what they value. The letter said. Sometimes they tell you by accident. My mother exhaled loudly. Like the room was the problem. Is this necessary? She asked the ceiling. We're grieving. Caroline. Aunt Mira warned. A small shake in her voice. Grief and clarity can share a table. Halvorsen said. Not unkindly. And for a flash, I loved him for that sentence. He set the letter down, but didn't close it. He placed one hand on the will. One on the words Gran had written. With that context. He said. I'll proceed. My mother sat up straighter. Every line of her body, an arrow pointed at the future, she'd already sketched for herself in boxes and balcony views. In my lap. My hands went cold. The clock on the wall ticked twice. Somewhere down the hall. A copier whirred like a distant storm. Clause 1. Halvorsen read. Voice steady. I leave my residence located at 143 Maple. He named the house. Illégale description. Its lot number. The way one might name a ship before a voyage. I closed my eyes for half a second and saw the porch steps. Scuffed in the middle, the kitchen window with the smudge no cleaner could remove, the strip of yard where peonies refused to quit. I opened my eyes. My mother's smile had settled into place like a badge. And then the room did what rooms do right before they change their minds. It went so quiet you could hear the paper vibrate under the weight of breath. The soft click of a pen being set down somewhere farther than you'd think sound could travel. I felt the edge of the table under my fingers and realized my grip might leave a mark. 2. Halvorsen said, pausing to make sure he read the next part exactly. My granddaughter. Lena Park. The sentence landed like thunder. You've been counting toward. My mother's smile faltered. Not all at once, but in micro-fractures. Hairline cracks running through glaze. She blinked. Slow. Then she laughed. A small, unbelieving sound. And tilted her head as if her ear had betrayed her. I'm sorry. She said lightly. To the room. To the air. To the narrative she'd curated. Could you read that again? For a second. No one moved. The sentence hung there between us. Bright and terrible. Like lightning that forgot to turn into thunder. Then sound returned all at once, a chair leg scuffing. Uncle Ray's breath catching. The copier down the hall spitting out paper, like it had an opinion. My mother's laugh came last too high. Too thin. That's a typo. She said. Obviously. She looked at me as if I'd orchestrated a prank and at Halvorsen as if he were a waiter who had brought the wrong dish. My mother didn't mean that. Halvorsen's voice didn't change. There's more. He said. He read the next clause, household contents. Savings. Investments items named with the careful decimals, Gran loved. To me. All to me. The only exception was a list of things to be distributed to the family at large, the sewing machine to Aunt Mira. The fishing rod to Uncle Ray. A small painting to Noah, because he'd once admired it and Gran had pretended not to notice. Then he lifted the letter again. The one with her handwriting. To my daughter. He read. You once called my granddaughter. Your biggest mistake. She became my greatest joy. I can't fix the years between those sentences. But I can choose where the things I tended all my life will land. I'm leaving them with the person who showed up. The room did another of those silence tricks. My mother's face rearranged into disbelief, so theatrical, I almost wondered if she'd rehearsed it. She stood. Then sat back down, because the chair resisted. That's cruel. She said. She was cruel at the end. No. Aunt Mira murmured. So softly, I felt it more than heard it. She was precise. My mother's eyes slid around the table searching for a better audience. She was confused. She tried. She had that cough. She was tired. People get talked into things. Halvorsen lifted a hand. Not to silence her, but to invite the facts into the room. Mrs. Grant anticipated there might be questions. He said. She asked me to play a recording. He opened a laptop and... After a second. The room filled with Gran's voice as if she'd stepped through a side door. Hi there. The recording began. Light. Composed. It's Evelyn. It's July 25. My attorney is here. So are the witnesses. I want to make clear. For those who weren't at Sunday dinner all those years ago. That I have considered this for a long time. You could hear paper in the background. The slide of a chair. Then her tone shifted into something I recognized from every hard conversation we'd ever had, gentle steel. I love my daughter. She said. I love her as the baby I held and as the woman she is now. Both truths fit in my hands. But love is not the same as rewarding harm. I will not make Lena pay for the rest of her life to prove she doesn't owe anyone for being born. My mother surged to her feet. Turn that off. She snapped. This is humiliating. No one is humiliating you. Halvorsen said. And pressed pause. Not because she ordered it, but because he'd planned to stop there. The recording continues with legal confirmations. We can play it in full if needed. There are also dates attached, Mrs. Grant executed this will the week after the Sunday dinner. She references. And reconfirmed it annually on her own. The most recent confirmation was this past July. That's impossible. My mother said. But her voice had softened into something close to pleading. She said she'd think about the condo. She said she would help me. She said she would think. I heard myself say. And felt how my voice didn't shake. Thinking isn't agreeing. My mother looked at me like she didn't recognize my mouth, making those words. Then she turned to the family for rescue. You're going to let this stand? After everything I sacrificed. After I raised a child alone. She owed me. Aunt Mira sat up straighter. She didn't owe you her house. She said. The quietest she'd ever sounded, and somehow the loudest. She tried to owe you respect. You wouldn't take it. Noah cleared his throat. Auntie. He said carefully. Choosing his lane. Like an athlete. Choosing a play. You know how Uncle Ray lends me his truck because I return it full of gas. Gran's doing that. She's giving things to the person who returns them better. It didn't fix anything. But it lowered the temperature. For a second. My mother's shoulders fell. As if gravity remembered her. Then she braced again. Pulling dignity around her like a coat. Fine. She said. We'll contest. People contest wills all the time. Halverson folded his hands. The way doctors do before they tell you the test came back and isn't what you feared, or is exactly what you feared. But here is what you can do. You have the right to petition. He said evenly. But I'm obligated to tell you that Mrs. Grant documented her reasoning thoroughly. There is the recording. There are dated notes in her hand. There are witnesses unrelated to the family who confirm her capacity and intent. He gestured to the letter. And there is this. Which a court would likely view as clear expression of purpose. My mother stared past him at the window. As if the sky might blink first. She never forgave me. She said to no one. She tried to say it as an accusation. But it came out like a confession. She tried. Aunt Mira said. And now she was crying a little. The way you cry, when the truth is too simple to fight. For years, she tried. The meeting wound down like a storm you watch on a weather radar, a red band sliding off the map. Paperwork got signed. People hugged in the hall in that awkward way where arms say what mouths can't. My mother left before the receptionist could bring the little dish of mince. She didn't look back. The glass door made a soft thud, the house back on Maple would have recognized. Outside. The sky had snapped into a hard blue. On the sidewalk. Uncle Ray put his hat back on wrong, and didn't fix it. You all right? Kid? He asked. And before I could answer. He added. Of course you're not. But you will be. At the house. I stood in the doorway a long time. The key cold in my hand. The steps gave their small sigh under my weight. Grand steps. Not my mother's. And for the first time since the funeral. The rooms didn't feel like they were holding their breath. I opened the windows the way Gran taught me, an inch in every room. To let the air move. In the kitchen. I set the lemon squeezer in its old spot near the stove. A strip of sunlight found it and made the chip gleam. People drifted in for a while, casseroles. Stories. A neighbor who cried into the crook of her arm and left without taking off her coat. Then the house did what houses do when the door finally stays shut. It settled. I made tea. I sat at the table with the mustard stain. Which I could never scrub fully away. And I wrote down what needed doing, thank you notes. The utilities. The garden schedule. My handwriting looked like a beginner's compared to Gran's. But the columns were neat. That night. I slept in her bed and dreamed of peonies. Not the flowers themselves, but the way they move in wind. All that mass, swaying like one body. In the morning. I went into the yard with pruning shears, and did what Gran always did first, checked on what had survived the heat. The peony leaves had gone dark. Preparing for winter. I pressed a hand to the dirt anyway. Look what refuses to quit. I said out loud. And felt ridiculous and also better. My mother didn't call that day. Or the next. When she finally did. 2 weeks later. Her number lit my screen. And my hand hovered. I answered because I wanted to be the kind of person who at least listens to the first sentence. So. She said. Not hello. Not how are you? Are you enjoying your little windfall? It's not little. I said. Because precision mattered. And it's not a windfall. It's a house. It's work. She huffed. You always make things sound noble. Then. Without a pause. You could sign the deed to me, and I could refinance. We can still fix this. I let the sentence land and flatten. I'm not signing anything over. I said. This is mine. She wanted it to be mine. You think this makes you better than me? She shot back. And there it was. The old misdirection. The hunger for a fight that would feed on me. I looked at the window, the inch of air. The curtain moving like a calm breath, and chose a different ending. No. I said. It makes me the person who shows up. That's all. I didn't wait for her reply. Take care. Mom. Then I ended the call and put the phone face down the way she had with hers. Except this time, the quiet that followed did not feel like surrender. It felt like a room choosing its own temperature. Grief kept doing its messy work. It surprised me in the cereal aisle when I reached for the brand Grand Light. It made me cry at a red light because a DJ played a song she would have called catchy. It softened and sharpened. Sometimes in the same hour. On Sundays, I still set the kettle at 558 and let it start to sing at 6. I didn't pick up the phone. I just listened to the water. I fixed small things first because small things finished look like proof. I oiled the front door hinges until they sighed instead of squealed. I scrubbed the checkered tablecloth and the mustard moon faded to a pale sun. I decided to let remain a map dot on the atlas of our family. I wrote the word peonies on the March square of the calendar. Even though March felt like a far shore. The lawyer sent the final documents by courier, a folder with my name and the house's name, like an introduction at a formal party. Inside was the ring. Gran's wedding band. Simple. Warm. A circle that had known more hands than mine. I slipped it onto a chain and wore it under my shirt. When I touched it, I could feel the seam where the jeweler had once resized it. A reminder that even perfect circles are adjusted by life. Neighbors stopped by with offers I didn't expect. Mr. Patel from 2 doors down said he could teach me to patch the porch rail. Mrs. Lopez offered her grandson to mow the lawn. Noah came on a weekend and fixed a leaky faucet like it was a tackle he'd drilled 100 times. We ate sandwiches on the steps. The sun. A thin gold ribbon across the yard. And he said, you know, Gran would hate the condo pool. Out of nowhere. I laughed so hard I choked. She'd call it a puddle with delusions. I said. And we sat there grinning like kids. On a rainy afternoon. I pulled the box of photo albums from the hall closet and spread them on the floor. There was my mother at 17. Fearless. A grin that thought the world would blink first. There was Gran at 25. Holding a cake with crooked candles. There was me at 12. Chin up. A bravery I didn't know I already had. I traced faces with a fingertip and felt the universe of small decisions and sharp words and changed wills and open windows collapse into one truth. You become what you tend. I don't know if my mother will call again. Maybe she won't. Because losing the story you told yourself is a kind of storm no one prepares you for. If she does, I don't know what I'll say. What I do know is this, in this house. We measure love by presence. Not promises. By who carries the chairs and writes the receipts and shows up when the room goes quiet. At dusk. I walk the yard and check the soil where the peonies sleep. I tell them about my day, because Gran would approve, and because plants don't interrupt. I come inside. Close the windows. And lock the door. The rooms hold the kind of silence that feels earned. On the mantel. The lemon squeezer catches the last light and throws it back. Small and stubborn. I set the calendar to July and write 18 inches ink darker than the rest. Not to relive the pain, but to honor the pivot, the day someone decided not to let a careless sentence become a life. You are not a mistake. Gran said to the girl, trembling over a sink full of lettuce. The girl believed it just enough to keep going. The woman in her house believes it all the way.